Well, it's 1:02. We'll get started. We know that your time's super precious. I am so grateful to be with you here today and have the chance to share, I think, some really exciting work that's happening in California. Getting down to Facts 3 is an opportunity for all of us in the state to take a moment to sit down and better understand how our education system is working. And so we're so grateful that you're joining us today so that we can tell you a little bit more about the research project and ways that we can work together in the next couple months to really advance continuous improvement in the state. So we'll spend the next hour getting to know a little bit more about the project, and then we'll have a Google form that we send afterwards that we'd love for everybody to complete. And before we officially get started, I want to take a moment to really express our deep gratitude to the funders who have made this work possible, particularly Silver Giving Foundation, Stewart, Serato, Heising Simons, and the Youth Thriving Fund. The partnership and investment in the project really speaks to a shared commitment that the state of California has for evidence, equity, and strengthening the public education system here. And because of this support, we have been able to bring up together almost 100 researchers, community members, and practitioners from across the state for the last year to ask really hard questions during this time and generate knowledge that can truly inform our policy and practice for our kids. And I think that it's just an amazing thing that California is continuing to invest in. So we're grateful for their partnership. Today's briefing, we're going to share some key updates about getting down to Facts 3, including our research release timeline, really talk about how we can strengthen some alignment of the ecosystem of education partners, because we know that you're deep involved in thinking about many aspects of our system and how can it improve, and an invitation to collaborate. And so I really want to highlight that we'll have a Google form at the end of the webinar that will ask you how we can partner, how we can bring researchers and present the material to your communities once it is released. And I have the pleasure of working with two of the most dedicated California education leaders. First, Professor Susanna Loeb, who is the founder of the Scale Institute at Stanford University and has been the principal author of the first two Getting Down to Facts reports. Thank you so much, Susanna, for helping us lead this work in this important time. And my good friend and colleague, many of you who have worked with over the decades, who has been tirelessly fighting for children in her many roles at the California Department of Education, where I first met her, at the Commission on Student Aid, and at West Ed before she has now joined us as the executive director for PACE California. Thank you so much, Lupita. So we have the opportunity to learn more about these 55 technical papers and 23 briefs now. And I want to hand it over, before I hand it over to Susanna to give an overview of the research agenda. All of our participants are muted. This is a webinar style briefing, but if you have questions, feel free throughout the next hour to put them in the chat in the Q&A, and we'll try and answer them as they come up. Any questions that we don't have the answer to, we'll be sure to follow up with you afterwards. So I'm going to hand it over to Susanna now, who's going to give us an overview of the research agenda.
Terrific. Thank you all for being here today. Brianna, thanks for setting this up. And definitely do ask questions in the chat. I'm just going to give kind of the high level look at this. So if we go on to the next slide, the real goal of this is to provide the best possible evidence on where California's education system is right now, where it can go, what the options are, and how we may be best able to get there so that California can really be a model of an excellent school system for all students. And so we keep this in mind as we're designing this overall research project. This is not the first Getting Down to Facts for those of you who are kind of new to the California specific research. We did this first starting in Schwarzenegger's administration, really in it really provided information that was useful in the Brown administration. And so at that point in 2007, we had Getting Down to Facts 1. And there we focused really a lot on the finance and governance side of what was going on in California. We had a system system with lots of requirements and a really kind of illogical system of how much money each district could get. And that project really helped provide evidence for the implementation of the local control funding formula and really the reduction of regulations in the education code. So that was getting down to facts one. Then getting down to facts two was in preparation for nuisance administration, and that informed substantial investments in early childhood education and some additional focus on more equitable school funding, including the finance of facilities as well as operating expenditures. And now, as we move in to 2026, when getting down to facts three is coming out, we're doing an updated set of research reports and policy briefs that's broader in many ways than we have before, but really focused as much as we can on these critical questions facing the state's education system in this time when we're going to be moving into a new administration. Next slide. Okay, so why might this be a good time? Well, the first is that we have a change in the governor of California, but it's also a shifting political landscape because of what's going on at the federal level. This is a chance to kind of inform policy and practice in this new world. And so it's a really interesting time politically to do this, and I think a useful time. We also have the ongoing effects of the pandemic, where we still see more disengagement, higher chronic absenteeism, lower achievement than we had kind of prior to the pandemic. So it's important because of the post-pandemic. And then I think it's hard for any of us to be in California and not see the both opportunity and challenges of the emerging technology. So we're doing a bunch of work in the project to understand how to best leverage the emergent technology to transform students' educational experiences, really use it to get the kind of experiences that benefit students to them, while also thinking about what are the capacities students will need in the long run. So these are three kind of driving needs that we see behind getting down to facts three. Our questions that we are addressing, and you'll see we address them very broadly, but just in alignment with what I just was saying, we have this question of how are California students in schools doing right now? And we're going to be looking at achievement and attendance and college going, course taking, some of the policies that have been put in, like community schools, some of the new pathways. Where are areas of success? Where are we struggling? Is there evidence that the resources are sufficient in some places and insufficient in others? It's really just a landscape of what's going on in California. We also actually, as part of that, ask families around the state what they're looking for out of their education system. Then second, we have this kind of big question, and really the motivating question behind the whole project, which is how can California deliver high quality instruction for all students and respond with excellence to changing needs and opportunities? So not only do we want to be great now, but we really want to create a system that when new challenges come up, we can adapt to them well. Within those, we do have particular focus on the educational experiences for multilingual learners. We think we can really lead the country in that area, and it's important for us to think about how we can do that best. And in the area of new technologies, where I think there are lots of reasons why we should be the state that really figures out how to leverage these well. So here's what we're producing. So the first thing we're producing is 55, as crazy as that is, technical reports. And these reports are, some of you will want to read each one in detail, but they really go in deep to a particular question. And the reason we have these kind of specific technical reports is because it helps to really focus. And we want those reports to provide rigorous research in their kind of narrow focus that they are working on. Then we're going to take those reports and get them into 21 research briefs. And these research briefs will combine studies. So for example, we'll have one on special education that brings in a study of the workforce for special education, the technologies in special education, the assessments in special education, a whole bunch of things together, because Each of those papers can do a good job on their own, on their specific topic, but we want something for you all to read that can really help bring all of those together. So I'll give you, after this slide, I think I'll show you the list of the 21 that we have right now, which aren't, maybe as things come up in our last meeting of the researchers, we'll adjust that a little bit, but we think it's these 21. Then addition to these 21 briefs, we will have one summary report, which won't be very long, but will really highlight what we think are the main takeaways of the project. In addition to these really research-focused technical reports, briefs, and summary report, we're going to do audience-specific materials in the summer of 2026 that make it easier for people to read. So all of the first things are coming out in May. Then we're going to produce multimedia reports, podcasts, all those kinds of things, so we really can make it accessible to a broad range of people. Okay, so here are the lists that we have now. And if you fill out that form at the end, we're going to send you the list of all the papers. We'll send you the list of these research briefs too. But for example, we have the goals for schools. What do we want from our schools? How do the student outcomes look right now? How do the finances look? How much are we spending? How has that changed over time? How does that differ across groups? We've got one on workforce patterns, retention, of teachers, all sorts of things like that. We have demographic and environmental changes. How does the changes in the environment, the changes in the population, how is that likely to affect schools? And what kinds of approaches would allow us to better adapt to those kinds of changes? We definitely have a focus on instructional improvement, as well as specific ones on curriculum, on math, and on English language arts. We have family and community engagement, one focus specifically on high schools and one on early childhood. Then these special groups of students, multilingual learners, special education students, or students with disabilities, and how we work in those areas, how we differentiate. So even aside from those groups of students, how do we meet the needs of each student in the classroom? How do we create an accountability system that allows flexibility, but does regulate the things we really do need to regulate? How do we make sure there's alignment in the system? Then we want to have one on charter schools, on the potential of technology, on data, and then on civics and student engagement. So it's a big list. What's the timeline? So in the winter and spring of 2025, we did a listening tour across the state. We probably talked to many of you while we were doing this. We formed advisory groups, and from that, we created a research agenda. Then in April, we recruited researchers for that research agenda. And in April, the researchers came together and really thought about what they would each be working on and whether the research agenda had everything it needed. We added a few studies into there, and then they started on their work. We came together again in a second convening in October, where each researcher could get feedback on their studies, and they could give feedback, and we could begin to think about some of the main takeaways, where conflicts might arise, what kind of additional work we needed. And then in the winter of 2026, now people are finishing up their studies. One thing that I didn't put on, which I just wanted to highlight as part of this, in addition to the listening tour, we did interviews with principals around the state. We did interviews with school leaders around the state, which went across projects. And then there were lots of surveys and individual interviews as part of specific projects. Then what's happening now is that the reports for all the drafts are due in the beginning of March, and they will get reviewed. So we have reviewers from outside of the project for each of the reports. Then they will return them in 1 week. That is the goal. They've agreed to do that. And then the final reports, the researchers will get that feedback, and the final reports will be due at the end of March, where we'll come together again to really identify the takeaways for each of the research briefs and for the project as a whole. And then the goal is to release jointly with Pace and Lupita as part of, in May, the beginning of May, we will have all of the products released. So the papers, the briefs, and the summary. And then after that, we'll add on with additional kinds of engagement. So let's see what's next.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Really major respected colleagues and friends. I see there's over 100 of us. Thank you so much for being here. I have the privilege of presenting on research to practice, and I'm really pleased to partner with Scale to advance evidence-based research to support sound policy development. One of our main functions is to ensure that policymakers have good research evidence to make decisions on. Major investments are being made yet again in this governor's budget, and in a couple of weeks we'll see a lot of the legislative priorities of legislators, and so we can add to this list. But Brianna, if we want to get to the next slide. So I just went ahead and added some sort of major big ticket items that were included in the governor's budget proposal. And one main one at the front there, the very first one, includes this state education governance and the move of the management of the California Department of Education to the State Board. As you know, that PACE did a report, a TK-12 education governance report that supported many other reports that have said virtually the same thing with regards to building coherence and alignment. Our report has a few other recommendations in it, but we also know that getting down to facts reports do include issues related to governance in many of the topics that are mentioned. So that'll help inform that policy and budget discussion as it goes through the process. And so I just wanted to sort of point that one out at first, because I know that it's in budget trailer bill language right now, but the fact is that many of the reports that I'm learning about do have issues related to governance that are popping up. So whether or not it's, part of this discussion for this particular proposal, or, other proposals that come forward to really support and add to that proposal, it is really important to keep that in mind. I also wanted to know that, share that another issue that connects directly with these budget priorities includes workforce investments that are informed by teacher certification policies. For instance, you'll note that the educator workforce, there's another $250 million. It is one time, but a lot of these, what we learn from some of the research could help support ongoing funding, or how to tweak it along the way. If $250 million is a nice chunk of money, and if for something reason it's not working as well as it could be, these reports, could inform policy changes along the way. I want to also add community schools expansion. One of the things that, we're pleased to see, even though there was a $4.1 billion investment the last few years, this $1 billion is ongoing, which means that this is a real opportunity to solidify sort of this investment, and any information or evidence that can support sort of the best practices through the California Community Implementation and this initial CCSPP grant outcomes would be incredibly helpful to that policy priority. And then also wanted to share that, in the Master Plan for Early Learning Care, there's always an investment in career tech ed around dual enrollment, dual credit. This one is in the 100 million, but I want to remind folks that it's not just to the TK-12 system, it's also to the community college system. So any support with regards to evidence that can help inform those investments would be incredibly helpful. We also, California is very grateful to receive the amount of support that it does with regards to expanded learning before and after school support, to the tune of $1,800 per student, which is great, and it's ongoing. And we've heard, I know that we've had my ear to the ground on sort of ways to get creative about how to go about spending that, how it could be spent, how there could be flexibility. So any information regarding that stream of funding that is so important and valuable, how it best could be shaped, would be incredibly helpful as well. And then also wanted to share that both for multilingual learners and special education and English learner classifications and cross-state comparison on policies for support for multilingual learners all that information can help support any of these sort of efforts that are currently included in the governor's proposal that could help support those subgroups of students as well, and more so if we learn things from those reports that can help support their learning as well. And the next slide, I think, let's see, you got it. Next slide. Okay, got it. No, sorry about that, Brianna. Can you go back one? Perfect. There's obviously I've always mentioned that there is what's front and center right now is immigration enforcement and its effect on students and schools and families and communities. And so as we're doing these qualitative and quantitative research reports, I know that definitely this issue is front and center in many of our communities in California. And so anything that can help inform legislators and policymakers with regards to what we're learning and what will need to be supported and enforced, supported and maybe a double down in support to certain students, subgroups of students in these communities will be very important. And there's been lots of legislation, but there is going to be a reckoning with how we recover from those types of activities in these communities. Also, there's been a lot of around ed finance and adequacy and special education as well. There's just a lot around LCFF and whether or not it's supporting students adequately, particularly the issue around average daily attendance and average daily attendance versus just enrollment. I know that issue is likely to come up this year, so I know that there's no study specifically, and I hope I'm not wrong, Brianna, on that issue, or maybe it has come up, but I know that the issue around education finance and LCFF and looking at that and whether or not that's adequate to meet the needs of today is going to definitely be front and center. I wanted to also mention that in the last couple of budgets, there's been an enormous amount of professional development through discretionary block grant. And last year, I believe, is 1.7 billion or 6 billion or so, and this year is 2.8 billion. And it is intended to be fully discretionary, but to support consequences of immigration actions, including attendance and enrollment declines. But also, there's a number of items within it that there's an encouragement or suggested uses around ELA, ELD framework, and literacy roadmap. So there are work around literacy or work around ELA and outcomes and goals are going to help inform that as well. Professional development for mathematics is another, for the mathematics framework is another suggested use, teacher recruitment and retention strategies, and then professional development of TK principles and guidelines of developmentally appropriate instruction is part of that block grant. So many of the reports that were just mentioned in the briefs hopefully will help support just informing sort of the uses and best practices and what we're learning in terms of governance and infrastructure as well. I wanted to also point out that there's a continued investment in reading difficulties, risk reading, another 40 million there. School accountability, which I know we have a report on charter schools, is also front and center and has been an issue in the legislature, definitely this last session and likely moving forward. And then I wanted to include there is, I was looking it up really quick, there's additional $2.2 billion investment in special education, improved services for students with disabilities. And so I don't know if that made it on there yet or not. It didn't make it on there yet. Sorry about that. You probably took it over there before I realized it. But there's obviously a big report on on special education and services, and the it also gets intertwined. I wanted to note that there's a lot of interweaving between, a report on finance that can affect special ed and special ed with finance. So obviously special education students and how they're funded is a big issue, but also their needs and support. And so these reports can really help support these investments and decisions that are being made. Let's see, made sure. So these reports, we really make sure that legislative hearings obviously will benefit from the synthesized evidence across briefs rather than isolated studies. So that's why while there's 55, I have to remember that number, 55 reports, we're going to have something, short 21 briefs. And then, there'll also be sort of some further sort of delineation through different webinars. So that will be helpful for policymakers. There's also cross-sector collaboration strengths around research in climate resilience, facilities enrollment decline that will be helpful to support these efforts. And then I think lastly, I think I've mentioned this around fiscal pressures heighten the importance of the studies like revenue sources and constraints and school closures and district finance, education finance, reorganizations and closures. That's just front and center right now in terms of the I have to say the pension, insurance, healthcare, and sexual harassment claims has really affected finances at schools, honestly. And so that study is going to be incredibly helpful to the legislature moving forward. So these reports, aren't just a one and done one time. They last for years. People refer back to them for many years. And so we're excited about being a part of that. And I think the next slide.
It's back to me. Thank you so much,
Yes.
Lita. I always learn a lot. I think that for all of us who get to see how Sacramento is actually running and all the work that goes into PACE, making sure we're translating the results into the most important questions that policymakers have right now. And I think that laying out exactly what the governor's proposal looks like in his final year, but also the ongoing policy questions that we're always trying to answer and improve towards. So I'm really grateful that we're partnering with PACE because, as Susanna and Lupita both mentioned, having 55 technical reports and 21 briefs, we know that there's a lot of information that's going to come out. And really, the most important question is, what is the question you have, and how can we help you and your organizations answer it? And so, our last part of this briefing is to really try and highlight where we can create alignment, partnerships, and bring this research to your ecosystem of actors who we know, like we said, is working day in and day out to ensure we're constantly improving. And so we want to think more expansively beyond just the very important decision makers in Sacramento. We also want to think about school board meetings and community groups who are across the state working to advance educational equity in our schools. And we want to hear from you after this webinar and our partner engagement forum to ensure that we can bring these briefings to you. As I'm going to go over a couple of the ways we plan on doing that and some of the opportunities that we have. So as Susanna and Lupita mentioned, we'll be releasing our final research results in early May to align as best as we can with this budget year, both for the state as well as for local school districts and county offices who have their budget developments in the spring. But as Lupita said, we do hope that most of this information is good and evergreen for many years to come, because we know that the improvement work will take many years for us to work. So we have many different modalities that we've tried to plan to think through engagement to reach both policymakers and practitioners across 10,000 schools and over 1,000 districts. And we know that since getting down to facts two, the media landscape has changed. And so the way that people engage with and find out about information has changed as well. And so we need your help to really understand where are the best places that we can bring this crucial updated evidence base. So our first opportunity will be we'll be leading 5 regional convenings across the state, and these are really designed to try and bring together a broad cross-section of local stakeholders to engage with getting down to facts findings and discuss the implications for local schools and communities. Much of this research is situated at a statewide level. We even have many cross-state comparisons, which I think are so important for folks in California to look and learn from what's going across the state. But it is also important that we kind of convene local stakeholders to think through what could this research mean for the Central Valley, for the Bay Area, for the Central Coast and Southern California, because we know each of these regions in California have specific challenges, specific needs, and things that they're working on. So we hope that these regional convenings might be an opportunity to open up the doors to a wide and intentionally diverse group of participants, including local media, regional media, community-based organizations, local elected officials, chambers of commerce, higher education officials in CSU and other preparation programs, and of course our Access, ESBA leaders, labor leaders, student civic groups, community foundations. We really see this as an opportunity to bring together, anywhere from 50 to 100 people to talk about and make sense of the research findings and talk about what it means for them in their own community and how it might change their practices or policies locally. Because that kind of making sense of the research and that co-interpretation is going to be foundational to actually moving improvement. And this will be in person, but our final question can be, what can we all do to move this research into policy and practice? Our next opportunity to engage with some of this research will be through topical webinars. So we'll provide, we're partnering with EdSource and some other partners to provide focused spaces to dig deeply into a specific area of getting down to facts research. So maybe you have a group that is particularly interested in special education findings around governance and finance and wants to sit down and think through what that could mean for practice and better services for students with disabilities. Or maybe you're more interested in emerging AI research and the best ways that it can be applied to teaching and learning and high impact tutoring. These sessions can pull specific researchers into a conversation with your organization and are designed for participants with a strong interest or expertise in a topic and a desire for a substantive discussion afterwards. And we see these as, the audience being a smaller group of practitioners, advocates, researchers, policymakers, or organizational leaders with aligned interest in specific topic areas. And maybe there's multiple in that briefing that you'd like to cover. But this will be done online and hopefully reach, over the many 58 counties and places where we may not host in-person events. And then we also are happy to schedule these even smaller group briefings for particularly the organizations that we know you all are a part of that are making day-to-day important decisions between now and even the end of the legislative cycle. And these can be as equally tailored, very high touch, and are really for leadership audiences or institutional audiences who are kind of making those kinds of decisions. And we'll work to make sure that they're prioritized like clarity, relevance, and that you have a direct dialogue with some of the researchers who worked on this. So, these are 3 different opportunities that we've kind of imagined to bring the research out of the academy and into our communities so that we can make sense of it. But of course, if there's other opportunities that you see, Lupita mentioned legislative sessions, hearings, other conferences. We are, I think, already on the schedule for the PTA statewide conference and a few others so that we can make sure that we're coming out to the places and spaces that you're already engaging with folks. So we are rapidly wrapping up our webinar. And I think we really just want to highlight that this next phase is a really high impact engagement phase for us. Moving into spring and summer, we'll be releasing the results in early May, but then really spending the next couple months moving into the summer to bring the research out. And we want this research to be designed to directly inform the policy and practice questions that you have right now. And that can be at a state statewide level and at a regional level. But we know that there are lots of opportunities to come to you, and we want to meet you with the formats, the technical reports, policy briefs, and media that will be most impactful to your communities. So the most important thing that you can do to help us actively co-lead the next phase of this work is to fill out our statewide partner briefing. As soon as you do that and you scan this QR code or go to the tiny URL, you'll immediately get access to a list of the full list of the 55 papers that Susanna mentioned. So if that's a good motivation, please go ahead and scan and click on the link now. Maybe Julia, if you could put the tiny URL link in the chat, that would be really helpful as well. But this will be a way for us to follow up with you directly and be able to schedule those meetings, briefings, and ensure that when findings are first released, that you're the first to access them. And we really depend on your partnership in this moment, because we know that everybody's attention and audience is so limited at this moment. There is so much information coming at us from all directions, but I believe that the evidence and the materials that we're providing are really crucial to helping us find clarity in this moment of how we can move forward. So we'll be sharing out the statewide partner briefing as well as the webinar and the list of briefings at the end of this webinar. But if you follow up that link now, you'll be able to fill it out. It should just take 5 minutes. So before we wrap up, we just want to, we'll leave some time for questions and answering, but afterwards, we'll be sending out the 2025 agenda just so that you know exactly when it's coming out, the draft list of upcoming papers. As Susanna said, titles may change a little bit, but we're really confident that these are, the topics that we're going to be covering now, and then a draft list of the upcoming briefs. I should mention that we'll also have a save the date coming out shortly for a joint scale and PACE conference in Sacramento in early May to share the results, as well as dates to follow for the other regional briefings across California.